We welcome in the one and only Jay St. Clair to the party. Jay, as I like to do, I start off with a very serious-minded question for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
How you doing, Jay?
You know, Matt, if I were any better, I would be on a cruise to Alaska right now.
A cruise to Alaska.
I like Alaska. It's great.
55 degrees up there right now.
A cruise to Alaska. You know, you surprise me sometime. I thought we would get if I felt any better, I'd be Donald J. Trump. That's what I thought you'd go with today. But you went with cruise to Alaska. I like it.
Yep. Now, what, did something happen last night?
Hey, what'd you watch on TV last night, Jay?
I watched a replay of the College World Series Championship game. And it was great.
Jay, I'm a big enough man as a Georgia Bulldog to say here publicly on these airwaves on 99.7 FM in the heart of Tennessee, congratulations and go Vols on your victory. Now, let's see if this Alabama Roll Tider over there has the ability to do the same. Cameron?
Well, Greg McElroy had a little problem with it.
Oh, I saw some of that. Did you see some of that, Cameron?
Greg McElroy?
Mm-hmm. I love Greg, by the way. Full disclosure, I met the guy. Greg is as down to earth as they come. I met him when I was still in Birmingham. But McElroy, the day after the Tennessee championship, all he did was like criticize the coach. He was like, you don't act like you've been there before. I mean, he was just grumpy. And the next day, to his credit, Jay, and you probably saw this, he apologized. He said, I'm sorry. That was not right. I shouldn't have done it.
No, you should.
Yeah, and I love the way it was a guy apology, right? A guy apology. Don't say I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry. You feel that way.
Yeah, I love it. It's that time of year. Let's go, man. Let's throw it down. I was actually in an interview where I was interviewing a candidate, and she was talking about how much of a Vols fan she was, and she saw the little A on my shirt, and she's like, oh. And I was like, that's glorious. I needed to hear that. I needed to know that.
Just a little O.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, you're one of those. And I'm like,
know.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so McElroy said, well, I'm as happy for Tennessee as anybody can be that played for Alabama.
Yes.
That's pretty good. Well, congratulations to all the Tennessee. I know your son and your grandson they've got to be so excited. I know you've got to be a little excited yourself, Jay.
Yeah, no, so you wouldn't know this, Cameron, but my son went to the University of Tennessee baseball camp in 1991.
All right.
And that's how long we've been supporting Tennessee baseball. And so Ron DeMonico was the coach back then. They were pretty good back then, but no.
Oh, well. Hey, that just, Bell, that just went out on us immediately. I mean, like that. So jump back on there. John in Lawrenceburg says, and I imagine this is for you, Cameron, Bama's time is just like Joe's. It's over and gone.
Hey, that's
Go Vols and Trump.
Hey, wishful thinking. I mean.
Thank you. Are you, all right, Jay, I suspect that somehow Cameron pulled a plug underneath the table here because you're talking about the Tennessee Volunteers, but that's okay. We got you back, and I'm glad we did.
That's okay.
But yeah. So your son was in baseball camp. Chuck was in baseball camp in the early 90s.
Yeah, in 1991, he went to the University of Tennessee baseball camp. So the point is just that we've got a long association with the Tennessee baseball program, and that was just a really good thing.
Well, Jay, I got up this morning, and obviously I stayed up late last night watching the salty tears of the liberals in the aftermath of the debate last evening. But when I got up this morning, let me tell you, one of the first things I saw was the Chevron decision, and the first human being I thought of was you, because you have talked to me about this for years. It was 15 years ago that you made me aware of this Chevron case and what it meant for America, and how much better you believed that America would be if the courts would see it a little bit differently. Just walk us through why this is so important.
Yeah, so let me start from 50,000 feet, and then we'll kind of get granular. It was really in the 1930s, man, during the New Deal, that the whole structure of the federal government changed. There used to just be three branches of government, right? You had Congress, the President, the Supreme Court. Well, they started passing all these laws, and then they started creating all these administrative agencies.
Mm-hmm.
The department, and now that, it goes on forever, but think of things like the Department of Education, the Department of Labor, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Environmental Protection Agency, and they go on and on. And so what's happened over the years is Congress passes these short little laws, and they give all the authority to enforce and interpret those to these agencies. These are not elected people, man. They're George Wallace famously referred to them as pointy-head bureaucrats. And the whole idea behind all this, Matt and Cameron, is that they are so-called, they're experts.
Mm-hmm.
You can't leave the states are too dumb to figure out how to govern. They're not smart enough. So we're going to go hire the best and brightest. That was the phrase they used. The best and brightest people that come into the government, and they're going to make the decisions. And we're going to give them all kind of authority. And the one thing the Chevron case did, it gave them the authority to interpret the law.
Yes.
Not to set policy, but to interpret the law. And that's clearly wrong. It is taking away the power of the courts. And that's been the law since 1984. And it's been a big, big part of the shift of power from not only Congress, but also from the Supreme Court over to these unelected, pointy-head bureaucrats in the administrative state.
Hey, Jay, I got a question for you. Do you know how many times, roughly, ballpark it, federal courts have cited Chevron?
Oh, wow. Hundreds. Probably hundreds.
Over 18,000 times. 18,000. I mean, it's that big of a deal. Wow.
Well, a huge, huge shadow, and fundamentally changes the balance of just brilliant when they had this separation of powers concept. We're not going to concentrate too much power in one branch of government. And Chevron and some of the other things around it, it's not just Chevron, but that's a big part of it, has shifted a lot of that. And now there is so much power in the executive branch. And it's not just the president. It's all these administrative agencies. I'll give you a perfect example, man. Title IX, right? Mm-hmm. You know, Title IX. Title IX was passed to help women, right? Is to make it equal funding and equal support and so forth for women's sports in college. Well, now under the Biden administration, the Department of Education has interpreted because of sex. You can't discriminate because of sex. Well, that was clearly meant to protect women.
Right.
Well, they've interpreted because of sex to mean transgender. So you can't keep boys from competing against girls. That's how we interpret the law, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And what it does, it creates a dynamic by which the liberal executive branch of government can avoid having to go to Congress and force Congress to pass additional legislation as to where we the people want to see this go with regard to transgenders, boys playing in girls' sports or whatever, right?
No, you said that exactly right, man.
It's bigger than that. It's bigger than even this, because it's going to force Congress to have to do its job and write the laws clearly. And that's going to be a game changer for every administration because, and Jay, you can comment on this too, administrations interpret. And when they know they're getting deference, they basically change the law to be what they want it to be. Nowhere is this done more than in immigration, right? Mm-hmm. And so now, because of Chevron being rolled back, Congress is going to have to do its job.
Absolutely. That's very well said.
Jay, you have for years given the example of what we're talking about with OSHA. Right. And how Congress doesn't do its job. It just leaves it up. Describe OSHA and give that as an example of kind of what we're talking about, where Congress cedes its authority over to the executive branch of government.
No, that's a great example, and it's right, in what I do for a living. So Congress decided, we need to make workplaces safer. So let's pass a law. That's all they did. And here's what the law says, man. There's a few other little things, but here's the substance of the law. Every employer in the United States must provide a safe workplace. We hereby give the Department of Labor all the authority to issue any regulations they want to enforce this law. The end.
I mean, what are you doing, Congress?
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
But they do that all the time. They dump it to the agency
because they don't want to do the hard work.
Exactly, and this is where Nancy Pelosi, remember, Affordable Health Care Act, passed the law to see what's in it.
Right.
She's saying you got to pass it to kick it to the agencies to write the law that you have to deal with.
That's very well said, Cameron. And it's, it bothers me for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is this idea that there truly are the best and the brightest who know more than the average gumps like us. There's this wonderful video of Milton Friedman, who I love.
Mm-hmm.
Love. Nobel Prize winning economist, and they're asking him about that. And you just have to watch the video, but he basically says, well, who are these people? Where did they come from? And how are they so much smarter than anybody else? Well, the answer is they aren't. And I'll tell you the best, most recent example of it, man. The Center for Disease Control.
There you go.
To listen to the experts. Well, look at what the experts did during the pandemic.
They just randomly told us that we needed to be 6 feet apart, and now they're admitting that they just kind of made that up.
And that masks don't work.
The masks don't work.
There's now clear science showing that masks don't work. But that's the best and the brightest. I'd rather have my cousin Bubba making decisions than those people.
Well, your cousin Bubba, he's a pretty smart fella. All right, so we'll find out the real-world ramifications of all of this next with Jay St. Clair. What does this mean? Will it be used retroactively against some of this ridiculous interpretation of what the law does or does not say? We'll find out from Jay. We'll get Cameron's thought on it as well. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Cameron steps out for a moment. Apparently, he has an interview more important than this one. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, except that thankfully we have Jay St. Clair to salve our wounds during FRI JAY.
I think the only reason he came in was to show off the truck, and now that he's roundly beaten you in that department, he's just taken off.
Oh, no, he's inspired me. I've got to get new tires and rims. He's inspired me now. Cameron got a new truck, Jay, and he's all excited about it.
And it's bigger than Matt's.
Bigger than my truck, Jay. I don't know what to say about it.
Out truck you, huh?
Yeah, well, now, you know how we do down in the South. I mean, I drove your truck over to Tunica, and I had to get me a truck. Now, Cameron saw my truck, had to get him a truck.
No, I'm never going to get out trucked again.
Jay, so, I mean, I imagine, and we were just talking during the break, Cameron and I, before he had to step out. So, in the real world, this is the way I see this going, right? So, if I have a problem with some, EPA regulatory deal, and I go to the court, before the EPA says, Your Honor, Chevron gives us the authority to make interpretation of this statute, and we say it says this, so we win. And the judge says, well, okay, I guess you win. Well, now, if I'm interpreting this properly, it puts the onus back on the judge to decide who's right and who's wrong, or ultimately kicks it back to Congress to be more clear and clarifying in how they've written the law.
No, you said that exactly right. Now, I think the real world implication is this, man. I think there will be less change from administration to administration on these kinds of points. I think it is going to give the executive branch, the administrative branch, really is what we're talking about, less discretion to interpret the law differently than the prior administration did. They're still going to flex their muscles, but they'll probably get challenged more. I mean, right now, Matt, when, you change administrations, the change in policy is just incredible. Well, it's not just policy, it's like law. It's like them coming in and saying, oh, no, Title VII, even though it was written to protect women, we're now going to use it against women.
Right.
They stand the law on its head. I think there'll be less of that in changing administration to administration, which means Congress should become more important. Now, whether they will be equal to that task, we'll see. They've been dysfunctional for 20 years. or longer, you know, and we can talk about that at a different time. I thought, well, that's gerrymandering, right? Because both parties has gotten so extreme, they've lost the ability to compromise.
Is this the biggest, I mean, outside of Dobbs, can you think of a bigger United States Supreme Court decision that will impact the size and scope and role of the federal government and the bureaucracy of the government? I mean, Dobbs is obviously huge, but this is a landmark decision. Would you agree?
Yes. No, absolutely. If you limit it just to the functioning of government, and it is without doubt the biggest decision in decades, probably. And, you know, it's just part of that reversal on the path we've been in really since the 1930s. I mean, it took us 90 years to get to where we are, Matt, and we're not going to change it overnight. But this is a big step in the right direction.
All right, we'll talk about a few other cases and get your telephone calls. Many folks want to talk to our man, Jay St. Clair, on these FRI Jay visits. My best friend, legal correspondent, life consultant, and gambling buddy, Jay St. Clair. I almost said golfing buddy. Almost did. But I decided not to do that. I don't know what.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to putting a couple of those together in West Tennessee here in a few weeks.
We're going to try to figure that out. We're getting that on later on this summer.
Absolutely.
I love it when a judge at the United States Supreme Court uses a word that I have to go look up. And John Roberts taught me a new word in one of these rulings this morning. Mm-hmm. Surplusage. Never heard that one. It's a noun. It means excessive or non-essential matter, especially matter contained in a pleading that is unnecessary or irrelevant. Surplusage. And
he did surplus. Yeah.
It's like surplus, but as a noun. And he did it in this January 6th case. And I know that this is being overshadowed by Chevron, and rightly so. But it's important to a lot of folks because a lot of people believe that the federal government has really overplayed its hand with regard to some of the prosecutions as to what happened on Jan 6th. And the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision held that the Department of Justice just went too far in interpreting statutes regarding, I guess it was obstruction and the obstruction convictions. Jay, I mean, is this a victory for strict interpretation of the law?
It is, but, you know, let's pull back a little bit, too, and make this distinction. There's a big difference between constitutional decisions and statutory interpretation decisions. Mm-hmm. A lot of the cases that we talk about, the big cases, turn on interpreting the Constitution. Well, this case is not about that. And frankly, the Chevron case is not about that either. They actually interpreted a statute in that case. And so, I mean, it's the kind of the meat and potatoes, really, of what the Supreme Court does. They decide many more cases in which they're just interpreting laws passed by Congress instead of interpreting the Constitution. But this case is certainly important to the people that were charged with this crime, man. You know, what's the old saying that you can talk about the unemployment rate all you want to, but if you don't have a job, unemployment rate's 100%.
That's right. You're right about that.
And so the people who are charged with these crimes, this is very important to them. And you know what? There's somebody else that's charged with this exact same crime.
Mm-hmm. Are his initials DJT?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
So everybody's waiting on the. And I don't know that we're going to get the ruling that we want on the immunity case, but everybody's kind of waiting on this. That's the last big one for the court that I know of. Jay, are there any others? I mean,
can I jump in real quick? I'm just curious about something. What was the lady's name that we had in here that you interviewed the one time, and her husband was on trial?
McCabe. Is that her name?
Do you know off the top of your head, will this ruling impact what happens to him in any way?
Nah, because he struck a police officer. That's what the accusation was, that he actually had made physical contact with a police officer.
Okay, I was just curious about that.
He was a police officer, and he claims that he made his claim is that he made physical contact with the officer to aid the police officer. And what they claim is that his contact was not to aid, but was to contribute to breaking into the car.
So this is relevant to his case.
I think so. I think so.
I was just interested in that.
This is more, Jay, if I'm reading it correctly, that anyone that was on property could be charged with attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. I think that's right.
Yeah, no, that's right. They were interpreting it as broadly as they can. The language is kind of broad. It says you can't, if you obstruct an official proceeding, then you can go to prison. Mm-hmm. Well, they said, no, that's not what that law means, because that was only a subpart of what it was talking about. And all that really came out of the Enron scandal and destruction of the evidence. And so they said, no, what this law is all about is destroying evidence. And so, no, if you just stand in the doorway, you didn't break this law.
Well, and it's drawing the line between disruptive conduct that is a peaceful protest versus conduct that rises to the level of actually interfering with the goings-on of an official proceeding.
It's not just interfering. You have to interfere with it by stopping some stuff from coming into evidence.
There you go. Okay, that's more specific.
So it's much more narrow than that. It's just an idle statute, and it's prosecutors have tremendous power, man, and judges do too. We saw this in the Trump criminal case in New York, and a lot of these folks in this January 6th thing, man, they're getting overcharged and oversentenced, and this has been a big part of it. This charge has been in just about every one of the cases. So, I mean, to these people, this is a really big deal.
Jay, we got a question from Gracie on the line. Gracie, you're on with our man Jay St. Clair on FRI JAY. What's on your mind, Gracie?
Hey, Jay, I do have a question, and give me a minute to get it out, okay?
Okay.
But you're talking about the federal government bureaucracy overplaying their hand segues perfectly into this. Axios had the best quote from last night with Biden. I'm changing the subject from Exxon, as you can tell. Their quote was, think of all the smart people lying to prop this man up. And I'm thinking, we clearly see he's not running the country. But yet when they're in the sit room making decisions of where, putting resources on foreign soil, whether it be, our equipment or our people or whatever, who's making those decisions? Because I bet you dollars for donuts, it's the Secretary of State or the Joint Chiefs or somebody nobody elected. Yep. How can we address that issue? Because we have several months to go, and this is a bigger issue than who's going to be Trump's opponent.
That's a great question. If we don't believe that the person that was elected as president is truly acting as president, do we, as a people, I mean, I suppose we revert back to our elected representatives and the ability to impeach, Jay? Is that where we're going with this?
No, actually, the only real remedies are impeachment, or, of course, there's the next election, Gracie. Or, the responsible people could do something under the 25th Amendment. They talked about that with Trump a lot, and I've heard a little bit of whispers about that with Biden. And just, they can step forward and say he's not fit to be president. But common, everyday people like you and me, Gracie, we can't directly affect that. The most we can do is just get in touch with our Congress people and ask them to do something. But Gracie, before you leave, I want to ask you a question.
No, I did a bad thing, Jay. I hung up on her. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I moved on. I bet I know what you were going to ask. And
yeah, well, no, I love accents, and I love trying to guess where people are from. And Gracie has such a distinctive accent that I just wanted to.
You wanted to give it a go. Well, Gracie, if you're listening, I apologize. Call back, and we'll do that if we have a second or two right at the end of the segment. Question for Jay, 2891 writes in on the membersnutrition.com super text line. How is today's Chevron ruling different than the 2022 SCOTUS ruling, West Virginia versus EPA? I don't know if you recall that one off the top of your head, Jay. I don't, but obviously maybe you do. West Virginia versus EPA, which was also said at the time would help rein in bureaucratic powers. Do you recall that off the top of your head?
I don't. I just have to confess to you, man. I don't.
No, I mean, I get it. If the guy writing or the gal writing wants to be more specific about what the decision West Virginia versus EPA came up with, maybe we can.
I can take a guess, though. I bet, and it's come back to me a little bit. There, they did not decide this whole issue of must courts defer to agencies in their interpretation of the law. I think what was at issue there is they just said the EPA went beyond the authority granted to them by Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And this court has started to do that a lot. It's called the major questions doctrine. Well, I'll tell you the perfect example of that. It was Biden, but it's really the Department of Education when he forewent $500 billion in student loans. Right? And he said, well, I'm just interpreting a law that was passed by Congress. And what they said in that case, and I'm thinking this is more what that EPA case was about, is that, no, look, when it's an issue this big, then we're not going to interpret a statute as giving one of these agencies that authority unless Congress clearly and specifically gave them that authority.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the major questions doctrine. So it's different from Chevron. Chevron just deals with, do they have the authority to say what the law is? What this other case says is, well, you can't just come in and do something big unless Congress specifically gave you the authority to do it.
Gracie's back, Jay, and I had a little finger slip there. So, Gracie, you missed some of the answer, but let me recap before Jay has a question for you, Gracie. You ready?
Okay.
So basically the recourse is that you impeach him through representation, you invoke the 25th Amendment, or you wait for the next election. Jay, do I have that right?
No, you said it just right. And, for common everyday folks like you and me, Gracie, the most we can do is just encourage our elected officials to move toward impeachment. But the real remedy for it is the next election. There's just not a lot we can do before the next election.
What if we're attacked between now and then, though?
Well, exactly. I mean, we just have to, be as we do the best we can, Grace. Elections have consequences. I mean, I'm meaning that seriously.
Yeah, and if it is revealed in the context of being attacked, for example, that it is obvious that the commander-in-chief is not in control, then you have a 25th Amendment option where the cabinet can initiate proceedings by which he is removed from power, or you can impeach him for not doing his duty or high crimes and misdemeanors. Gracie, Jay's got a question for you.
Okay.
Gracie, I love accents. There's not a Southern accent. There's hundreds of them. And you have such a distinctive, beautiful accent that I've just got to know where you grew up. I've learned to ask the question that way. But I'm going to take a guess. I'm from Lower East Tennessee. I was born down in Sequatchie. And I just think for all the world, you grew up somewhere down around where I'm from, Lower East Tennessee. It may be Middle Tennessee, but I think it's Lower East Tennessee. Am I right?
I was born and bred in Nashville, although I spent a lot of my younger formative years in Williamson County.
That's not bad. That's Middle Tennessee. You're close, Jay.
No, I got it. Well, I love your accent, Gracie. My mother's middle name, is your name Grace?
Yes.
My mother's middle name was Grace. Sylvia Grace.
Okay.
And that's the sun as it comes, and I love it.
Gracie, you know how much we love you. Take care, dear.
Bye.
Sorry I accidentally hung up on you a minute ago. That was my bad. Jay, here's the most important question I have for you.
Okay.
What are you doing Sunday?
I'm not sure I've thought that far ahead.
Well, if you have a wild hair and you want to drive north, I have an extra ticket for the Nashville Superspeedway Ally 400 Sunday afternoon.
Well, my race team is in Rockingham, North Carolina this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe that the man actually doesn't have plans when there was a race to be had when you held the ticket. How was that already set up?
Well, I just got the ticket.
You didn't text him and say, like, hey, man, I just got this.
I think I've got it 2 days. Oh, yesterday I was confirmed to have. Okay, it was 2 days ago, but I was busy. So I'm asking him right now.
No, I got it. And listen, because this race is coming up, they're replaying that prayer from the preacher.
Oh, I love it.
Years ago. And apparently he does the invocation every Friday night out at the fairgrounds. You got to get that guy.
I need to get the dude on. I need to get that Reverend. You're right. I do need to get him on. If you've never, I'm going to play it.
You need to get him. You need to get his wife because she's about as funny as he is.